The little girl who defied the government for her dog. This one starts with a mistake. A dog built for war, abandoned to die, and a little girl too young to understand why kindness should ever need permission. Daisy Miller didn't go looking for a hero that night. She found him bleeding behind a grocery store dumpster, his body broken, his spirit fading. She could have walked away. Most people would have. But Daisy didn't believe in most people. What she did next, dragging that 90-pound dog home with her bare hands, would spark a national debate between heart and law, compassion and control. They called him Project Sentinel 7A. She called him Shadow. And when the government came to take him back, Daisy stood in front of their guns and said the words that silenced a courtroom and changed a country. He's not a weapon. He's my friend. This isn't just the story of a dog. It's the story of how one act of love reminded us all what it means to be human. The sky over Maplebrook, a quiet Midwestern town, was bruised purple and gray. Rain came down in slanted sheets, drumming on rooftops, running through gutters, soaking the cracked asphalt of Elm Street. The kind of rain that made grown-ups hurry inside. But for Daisy Miller, age 6, it was an adventure. Her yellow raincoat flapped like a little cape as she chased a paper boat down the flooded curb, squealing each time it bobbed over a puddle. The wind tugged her hood back. Strands of damp brown hair stuck to her cheeks. Her laughter echoed between the houses, until it didn't. A faint sound broke through the rain. Not thunder, not wind. A whimper. Daisy froze. The paper boat drifted away unnoticed. She turned, squinting toward a narrow alley between two abandoned shops. Shadows pooled thick there, black and wet. She heard it again. A low, broken cry, like something trying not to die. Her small boots splashed toward the sound. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling but curious. "Is someone there?" When her eyes adjusted, she gasped. A huge shape lay against the brick wall, fur matted with mud, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. A German shepherd. His chest rose unevenly. A thin line of blood trickled from his shoulder, mixing with the rain and running into the drain. For a moment, Daisy couldn't move. The dog's eyes, deep human brown, met hers. They were tired, watchful, but not cruel. He growled weakly, a warning that had no strength behind it. "Oh no," she whispered. "You're hurt." She took a cautious step closer. The dog's ears twitched, body tense. He bared his teeth. A soldier's reflex, not malice. Daisy stopped, her small hands trembling. But something in those eyes, something that looked like pain and trust tangled together, pulled her forward again. She knelt beside him, the cold rain soaking her knees. "Hey, boy, you're not gonna die tonight." The words came out in a whisper, almost like a promise. The dog's breathing hitched. He tried to lift his head, but collapsed against her knees. Daisy gently reached out, her tiny fingers brushing his fur, sticky with blood, warm from fever. He didn't bite. He just let out a sound that was half sigh, half surrender. From the end of the alley, the lights from Mrs. Jenkins's porch flickered. The neighbor's silhouette appeared through the rain, tall, suspicious, always watching. Daisy's heart raced. If Mrs. Jenkins saw her, she'd tell Mom, but Daisy couldn't leave him. "I'll get you home," she said firmly, as if commanding herself. She tugged off her raincoat and draped it over his body. The fabric turned red where it touched his wounds. Daisy's small arms strained as she tried to lift him. Impossible. The dog was huge, heavy with muscle and fatigue. Time. But when she pulled, he tried to stand, his front paws scraping weakly against the pavement. "That's it," she encouraged softly. "Just a little more." The rain grew heavier. Puddles became rivers along the street. Daisy wrapped one arm around his neck, using all the strength in her tiny frame. Step by step, they moved out of the alley, a broken soldier and a child barely tall enough to reach his shoulder. Her sneakers slipped. Her breath came in gasps, but she didn't let go. Behind her, Mrs. Jenkins's voice drifted faintly through the storm. "What on earth is that girl dragging home?" Daisy didn't answer. She was too focused on the creature beside her. The rhythm of his labored breathing, the faint glint of metal beneath the fur near his ear, and the blood pooling behind them, mixing with rainwater, painting the street red. When they reached the corner, the dog's strength gave out. He collapsed, sides heaving, eyes fluttering. For a terrible second, Daisy thought he'd stopped breathing. She dropped to her knees beside him. "No, no, no," she cried, shaking his shoulder. "Come on, Shadow!" It was the first time she said his name. She didn't know where it came from. Maybe from the darkness he crawled out of. Maybe because he was fading like one. But it fit. And somehow, hearing it, the dog stirred. His eyes opened again. Relief washed over her like sunlight through the rain. She hugged his head, whispering over and over, "It's okay. You're safe now." From a distance, thunder rolled. But in Sanmon, Daisy's world, everything had gone quiet except the fragile beat of life beside her. She looked toward her house down the block, the warm glow of lights through fogged windows. Home felt a mile away, but she was determined. She took a deep breath, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and began dragging him again, inch by inch. By the time she reached her driveway, her arms burned, her knees ached, and the rain had nearly stopped. Her paper boat lay crushed in the gutter. Daisy didn't notice. She was too busy whispering encouragements to her wounded friend. When the dog finally crossed the threshold of the porch, he collapsed again, this time onto the welcome mat. Daisy dropped beside him, panting, her raincoat now completely red. Behind her, the storm began to ease. The air smelled like wet earth and something metallic, blood and hope, mixed together. Daisy leaned close to his ear and said softly, "You made it home, Shadow. You're safe with me now." The dog's tail twitched once, faintly, a gesture so small it almost broke her heart. Then his eyes closed, trusting the warmth of a child he'd met less than an hour ago. The porch light flickered. Inside, the miller's clock struck 9, and for the first time that night, the rain stopped. But in the puddles along the street, streaks of red swirled slowly, like the world itself had bled for what was about to begin. The front door creaked open under the soft pressure of Daisy's small hands. The hinges gave a long sigh, as if even the house felt the weight of what she was dragging inside. The porch light threw pale gold across the entryway, warm and familiar, until it caught the trail of red streaks stretching across the hardwood floor. "Come on, Shadow," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying and rain. "Just a little farther." The dog's paws slipped once, claws scraping the floor. He groaned but didn't resist as Daisy tugged him inch by inch across the threshold. The smell of wet fur and iron filled the air. Behind them, the wind pressed against the windows like a restless ghost. Inside, the house was quiet. The kitchen clock ticked. A pot roast cooled on the counter. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of a washing machine rolled through the floorboards. Daisy's parents wouldn't be home for another 20 minutes. That was what she'd counted on. She knelt beside Shadow, panting from exhaustion, the knees of her pajamas soaked through. She touched his muzzle gently. "It's okay. You're safe now. Promise." The dog blinked slowly, chest rising with ragged effort. His breath came out in a low growl, not a threat, but a sound that said hurt. Daisy looked at the blood pooling beneath his shoulder. She ran to the bathroom, fetched a towel, and came back dragging the white fabric behind her like a flag of surrender. She pressed it against his wound, her little hands trembling. The towel turned crimson within seconds. "It's okay," she repeated, mostly to herself. "Mom says every life deserves kindness." The headlights flashed across the living room window, her parents' truck pulling into the driveway. "Oh no," Daisy whispered. "Not yet." The engine cut off, followed by car doors slamming, voices, laughter. Then her father's boots hit the porch steps. "Daisy, we're home, sweetheart." Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might shake the walls. She glanced at Shadow, the raincoat still draped over him, the blood seeping through, his eyes barely open. "Please don't bark," she whispered desperately. "Please." The door opened. Warm yellow light spilled in, followed by the familiar scent of smoke and pine soap. Her father, John Miller, still wearing his firefighter jacket, and Laura Miller, her mother, with a tote of school papers under one arm. They were mid-conversation until they saw the floor. "Daisy!" Laura gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God! Is that blood?" John dropped his keys. His voice hardened instantly, trained by years of emergencies. "Where's the injury? Daisy, are you hurt?" Before she could answer, Shadow shifted on the floor, letting out a low, guttural groan that rolled through the house like thunder. John froze mid-step. Laura grabbed Daisy by the shoulders and pulled her back. What did you bring home?" she whispered, staring at the massive, wounded animal on their carpet. Daisy's lips trembled. "He was hurt, Mom. He was bleeding in the rain. I couldn't just leave him there." John approached slowly, eyes sharp, scanning the dog's posture, the scars under the mud. Even through the grime, Shadow didn't look wild. He looked disciplined, his head held low, but his body coiled, alert even in pain. "Jesus," John murmured. "This isn't some stray. Look at him, that's a trained dog. Police, maybe military." Laura backed up, her voice shaking. "We can't keep him here, John. What if he's dangerous? Look at his size." "He's not scary, Mom," Daisy cried, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "He's just hurt." But Laura couldn't take her eyes off the blood soaking into the rug. The metallic smell turned her stomach. "Daisy, he could be sick, or violent, or—" "He's not!" Daisy's voice cracked like glass. "He looked at me like he needed help. You always tell me to be kind." Her father crouched beside the dog now, cautious but drawn in. He'd seen plenty of broken things in his job, homes, cars, people, but there was something about this animal that felt different. The dog's coat was thick, coarse, but beneath the blood and dirt were symmetrical scars and a faint tattoo behind his ear, a series of numbers and letters. John brushed the fur aside, squinting. "Laura, come look at this." She hesitated, then leaned closer. The mark was unmistakable, small, clinical, burned into the skin. "That's not a normal ID tag," she said quietly. "It looks official." Shadow stirred, his eyes flickering open. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the ticking clock. His gaze met John's, calm, intelligent, measuring. Timed atoms, not wild, not fearful, trained. Then his head turned, slow and deliberate, toward Daisy. The faintest wag of his tail brushed the floor. Laura's shoulders softened despite herself. He knows her. Daisy dropped to her knees beside him again, her tiny hand resting on his muzzle. Shadow exhaled shakily, then did something that made the air in the room shift. He leaned forward and licked her hand. A slow, deliberate motion, as if to say thank you. Laura covered her mouth, eyes glistening. Oh. Oh my God. John stood, wiping his palms on his jeans. If he's a service dog, someone out there's missing him. But I'll be damned if we let him die on this floor. He crossed to the hallway closet, grabbing an old blanket and a first aid kit. His movements were brisk, efficient, the way firefighters move when instinct takes over. Daisy, get another towel. Laura, boil some water. Laura hesitated. John, we don't even know who he belongs to. I don't care who he belongs to, John cut in, voice rough with conviction. Right now, he's ours to save. Daisy looked up at him, eyes wide and shining. We're gonna help him? John crouched, meeting her gaze. Yeah, kiddo. If we're doing this, we do it right. He slid his arms under Shadow, grunting with effort. The dog winced, a low sound deep in his chest, but didn't fight. John lifted him, carefully, the way he'd lift a wounded firefighter, with respect. Daisy trailed close behind, holding the raincoat that had been his only shelter. As they carried him toward the garage, a trail of blood followed them like a dark ribbon across the floor. The house smelled of iron and rain, fear and hope. Laura fetched a flashlight, her hands trembling. The vet's 20 minutes away. They'll know what to do. Shadow's head lolled weakly in John's arms, but when Daisy brushed her hand across his ear, he opened his eyes, those deep soldier's eyes, and let out a faint rumble, almost a sigh. Daisy leaned close and whispered, We're gonna fix you, okay? You'll see. John reached for his car keys, his voice steady now, the command tone of a man who'd made peace with danger. All right, he said. Let's move. As the family stepped out into the night again, rain began to fall softly. Not the wild storm from before, but a quiet, cleansing drizzle, as if the sky itself was exhaling. Behind them, the living room light flickered across the blood-stained carpet, silent witness to the moment everything changed. And in that fleeting second, before the door closed, Shadow turned his head toward Daisy and gave one last look, a look that would echo through her heart for the rest of her life. The neon sign outside Grant Animal Care flickered in and out of life, casting thin streaks of red across the rain-soaked pavement. It was almost midnight, the kind of hour when emergencies arrived covered in panic and headlights. Inside, Dr. Michael Grant was halfway through locking up. A man in his 40s, calm-faced but tired, the lines around his eyes drawn by years of late nights and impossible decisions. He'd just finished bandaging a stray cat when the front door burst open. Please, John Miller's voice carried through the clinic. We need help, right now. Dr. Grant turned, startled. Then he saw the blood. Laura rushed in first, soaked to the bone, carrying Daisy in her arms. Behind them, John stumbled through the doorway, clutching the massive German shepherd against his chest. The animal's fur was dark with rain and blood, his head lolling weakly over John's shoulder. Oh, dear God, Dr. Grant muttered, pushing a gurney forward. Set him down. Gently, gently. The wheels squeaked as the man and the vet lowered the dog onto the table. Daisy pressed up beside them, clutching her soaked teddy bear. Please save him, she whispered. He's trying so hard. Grant flicked on the overhead light. The sterile brightness revealed the full damage, a deep laceration near the shoulder, multiple bruises along the ribs, and burns around the neck where a collar must have been. His experienced eye recognized training scars, not from abuse, time law 300 ms, but from drills. repetition, discipline. He frowned. This isn't a regular house dog. John exhaled, wiping his forehead. Found him bleeding in an alley. My daughter couldn't just walk away. Grant's hands moved automatically, clipping fur, cleaning wounds, setting up an IV. He could feel Daisy's gaze locked on his every motion, the small tremor of hope vibrating in the air. Name? He asked out of habit. Daisy answered softly. Shadow. The vet glanced at her. She couldn't be older than 6, face streaked with tears and rain. He nodded once. All right, Shadow. Let's see what we're dealing with. He ran a scanner along the dog's neck. The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of medical equipment. Then, a sharp beep, beep, beep sounded, louder than before. Grant froze. His eyes narrowed at the small handheld screen. Lines of encrypted numbers scrolled across it, followed by a message that made his stomach drop. Restricted. Classified entity. Property of U.S. Defense Program. What the hell? He murmured. Laura caught the tone in his voice. What is it? He swallowed, lowering the scanner slowly. This dog. He's not just a soldier. He's government property. John frowned. Government? You mean, like military? Worse, Grant said quietly. That chip, it's encrypted, not standard police K9 identification. I've only seen something like this once. Special Research Division. AI augmentation, behavior conditioning, experimental stuff. Daisy blinked up at him, not understanding, but her mother did. Michael, if that's true, we shouldn't even— We're already in it, John interrupted, his voice low but steady. Then tonight, he's just a patient. Grant met his eyes. The firefighter's tone left no room for argument. The vet looked down at the blood pooling under the table, then at the girl still clutching her bear, her bottom lip trembling. He sighed, scrubbed his hands again, and said quietly, Then let's make sure he lives. The air grew thick with tension, not from the wound, but from the knowledge that every minute they spent here broke some unspoken rule. Grant switched off the security cameras, a rare act of defiance. If anyone asks, I never saw this dog, he muttered. For the next half hour, the clinic became a battlefield of quiet determination. Laura held gauze and saline. John steadied Shadow's legs while Grant stitched. Daisy stood on a stool beside the table, watching with eyes too old for her age. The rain outside softened into a steady hum, like the world itself was holding its breath. Pulse steadying, Grant murmured. He's a fighter. Shadow twitched, eyes flickering beneath his eyelids. Daisy reached out instinctively, brushing her hand against his paw. The big dog's muscles eased at her touch. His breathing slowed, no longer labored. Grant noticed. You have a way with him, he said softly. Daisy nodded, her voice barely audible. He was scared, but I told him I'd keep him safe. Grant didn't respond. He didn't need to. There was something sacred about the way the child said it, simple words carrying the weight of a vow. The vet continued working in silence, sweat beaded on his forehead. When he finished the last stitch, he stepped back, pulling off his gloves with a snap. He'll make it through the night, he said finally, if infection doesn't set in. Laura exhaled in relief. John's shoulders sagged. Daisy reached for Shadow's muzzle, whispering something only he could hear. Then a new sound broke the calm. The scanner, still sitting on the counter, began to flash again. Grant turned sharply. The display showed a blinking red icon. Signal transmitted. Location synced. Oh no. His pulse quickened. The chip. It sent a signal when I scanned it. What does that mean? Laura asked. It means someone out there knows exactly where this dog is. The words hung heavy in the air. John looked toward the door, instinctively stepping between his family and the outside world. Daisy clutched Shadow's paw tighter. Grant moved to the counter, yanked the battery from the scanner, and tossed it aside. The screen went dark. We might have a few hours before anyone comes. Maybe less. Laura's voice trembled. Then what do we do? Grant looked down at the dog. I keep my oath. I save him. That's all I can do. For the next few minutes, they cleaned up in silence. Blood wiped from steel, towels soaking in a sink. Grant watched Daisy stroke Shadow's fur, her hand small and sure. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it. That strange connection between them, something deeper than luck or chance. As the anesthesia began to fade, Shadow's ear twitched. His nose twitched once, catching Daisy's scent. Then his eyes opened, not fully, but enough to meet hers, brown and tired, but alive. Hey there, Daisy whispered, leaning close. You're okay now. The dog blinked slowly. His paw shifted, brushing her wrist. Grant saw it and stopped mid-step. That's impossible, he murmured. He's responding before consciousness. Daisy smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. He knows me. Shadow's tail gave the slightest thump against the table. Daisy leaned closer, her lips near his ear, her voice soft as rain. You saved me, she whispered. Now I'll save you back. Grant swallowed the lump in his throat. He'd seen war dogs, trauma cases, rescues, but nothing like this. There was a hum between them, something alive and wordless. For a fleeting second, he wondered if maybe the military wasn't the only one experimenting with intelligence. Maybe love, too, had its own secret science. John placed a hand on the vet's shoulder. Thank you, Doc. Grant nodded, voice rough. You should get home. Keep him quiet. Don't tell anyone. He hesitated before adding, and pray that whoever's looking for this dog doesn't find you. As the Millers carried Shadow back into the night, the rain began again. Gentle, rhythmic, almost forgiving. Grant watched through the window as their taillights disappeared down the empty road. He reached over, turned off the clinic lights, and stood in the dark for a long moment. Then, to no one in particular, he whispered, God help that family. Because something tells me this isn't over. The horizon was still painted in soft grays when the Millers' old pickup rolled back into the driveway. Dawn had not yet broken, that fragile hour when the world is half asleep, and even the wind seems to whisper instead of blow. The engine cut off, and for a moment, there was only silence. John climbed out first, his shirt stained with blood and mud. Laura followed, pale from exhaustion. In the back seat, Daisy's head rested against Shadow's flank, her tiny hand never leaving his fur. The German shepherd's breathing was slow but steady, proof that for now, he was still fighting. Easy now, John murmured as he opened the door. Let's get him inside before anyone sees. But someone did. Across the street, behind lace curtains yellowed with age, Mrs. Beatrice Jenkins was already awake. The woman prided herself on two things: her roses and her vigilance. She had the sort of sharp eyes that caught everything. A misplaced trash bin, a car parked too long, a teenage boy sneaking home late. And this sight before sunrise, was unusual, even by her standards. Through her window, she saw the Millers lifting something large from the truck bed. Its size startled her. A massive, dark shape covered by a blanket, limp but breathing. A flash of fur caught the early light. Her brows knitted. What on earth? She slipped on her glasses, pressing closer to the glass. The blanket shifted, and for 1 second, the dog's head appeared. Strong jawline, cropped ears, the faint glint of a tag near the neck. Military, her mind supplied instinctively. She'd seen photos on the news. Service dogs, police dogs, soldiers in fur. Her mouth tightened. They're hiding something. From the driveway, John whispered hoarsely to his wife. Careful. Lift from the chest, not the leg. They carried Shadow through the side door into the garage, unaware of the eyes watching from across the street. Mrs. Jenkins narrowed her gaze. Middle of the night, covered in blood, sneaking in through the back, and that animal looked trained. Her imagination filled in the rest. Stolen property. Maybe dangerous. Maybe worse. She reached for her phone. Inside the house, Laura laid out a comforter on the floor beside the laundry room heater. Daisy knelt down, helping her father settle Shadow onto the soft fabric. The big dog let out a weak groan, but didn't resist. Daisy smoothed the fur on his neck, whispering words only he could hear. You're home now. No one's gonna hurt you again. John pulled the door half shut, glancing toward the windows. We'll tell folks he's a rescue. Nothing more. Laura nodded, though worry flickered in her eyes. What if someone already saw? John's expression hardened. Then we'll deal with it. Across the street, Mrs. Jenkins's living room was lit by the cold glow of her cell phone screen. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. For a moment, she hesitated. She liked the Millers. Nice folks, polite, quiet. Daisy was a sweet little girl who brought her cookies every Christmas. But rules were rules, and Beatrice Jenkins lived by them. She pressed the call button. Sheriff's office, came the sleepy voice on the other end. This is Beatrice Jenkins, she said, lowering her voice as if delivering state secrets. I think my neighbors are involved in something illegal. I just saw them bring home what looks like a military dog, covered in blood. I believe they've kidnapped it. There was a pause. Ma'am, did you say kidnapped a dog? Yes, a very large one. It had a tag. Looked like those special service dogs from the news. They were sneaking around like criminals. You'd better send someone before they hide it. The dispatcher sighed quietly, but promised to log the call. Beatrice hung up, satisfied. She peeked back through the curtains just in time to see the Miller porch light flicker out. Inside that home, a very different scene unfolded. Shadow stirred. His breathing hitched as the anesthesia faded fully. Daisy's small hand rested over his paw, feeling every tremor. Laura knelt beside her, brushing back her daughter's hair. He's in pain, honey. Let him rest. I'll stay with him, Daisy murmured. Laura hesitated, then nodded. Just for a little while. She kissed Daisy's forehead and stood, exchanging a weary glance with John before retreating to the kitchen. The coffee machine hummed softly, filling the silence with domestic familiarity. The calm before the storm, neither of them saw coming. In the laundry room, Daisy whispered to Shadow, her voice so gentle it could have been mistaken for the hum of the heater. You were so brave. The doctor said you might dream, but don't be scared. I'll be right here. Shadow's ears flicked at the sound of her voice. He opened his eyes slightly, pupils dilated but alert. His gaze found her instantly. Even wounded, even weak, there was recognition. That same steady soldier's focus. He gave a faint growl, not threatening, but warning. His instincts alerting him to something beyond the wall. From outside, gravel crunched. A shadow moved near the fence. Mrs. Jenkins had stepped onto her porch, robe cinched tight, phone still in hand. Curiosity gnawed at her. She tiptoed to the fence, peering through a crack in the wood. "Let's see what you're hiding, Millers," she muttered. Inside, Shadow's head lifted slightly. His nostrils flared, catching her scent. Unfamiliar. Prying. A deep rumble formed in his chest. The sound rolled low, primal and protective. Mrs. Jenkins stumbled back, heart pounding. "Oh, my lord!" she gasped, clutching her robe. "That beast almost sensed me!" She hurried inside, slamming her door, whispering to herself, "They've trained it to attack. Definitely government. I did the right thing calling the sheriff." Back in the Miller house, Daisy placed her hand on Shadow's muzzle. "Shh, it's okay. No one's gonna hurt us." "Time 400 mems." His growl softened, fading into a sigh. He laid his head back down, pressing his paw closer to her hand. Their breathing slowly fell into rhythm, the steady in and out of two beings who, against all odds, had found safety in each other. Hours passed. The house grew still. Outside, the world woke. A few cars, a barking dog down the street, the faint ring of Mrs. Jenkins's phone as she recounted her discovery to a friend. By evening, the news of the mystery dog had already reached the local sheriff's office. But inside the Miller home, time stood still. Laura cooked dinner, though no one ate much. John cleaned the tools from the night before, his mind replaying Dr. Grant's warning. Someone out there knows this dog exists. And in the small laundry room, under the hum of the heater, Daisy lay curled beside Shadow on the floor. Her eyelids drooped, exhaustion pulling her down. She still held his paw, her cheek resting against his fur. Shadow's tail twitched once, then again. Faint, rhythmic. His heart beat slow but strong beneath her hand. As she drifted into sleep, her breathing matched his perfectly, like two clocks syncing in time. In that soft quiet, there was a fragile peace, a moment that could break at the sound of a single knock on the door. But for now, all was still. The night held them like a promise. Outside, the neighbor's porch light stayed on, a lone sentinel in the dark, watching, waiting, not knowing she had just set in motion a storm that would test love, loyalty, and the sourcing limits of human compassion. The week passed in uneasy quiet. But quiet, Daisy's father often said, was what came before the sirens. Each morning since that long night at the vet, life in the Miller home had been a fragile routine. Whispered prayers, soft footsteps, the hum of an oxygen machine they'd borrowed from Dr. Grant. Shadow had begun to heal. His wounds closed slowly, his strength returning. He followed Daisy everywhere now, from her bedroom to the backyard, his eyes always scanning the horizon, as if expecting something she couldn't see. But on the 7th morning, the world changed. It started with a sound too heavy for a small-town street. Engines, synchronized and cold. Tires crunched on gravel. Daisy was at the window, still in her pajamas, when she saw them. A convoy of black SUVs crawling down Elm Street, sunlight glinting off their tinted glass. Her heart sank. "Mom," she whispered, "there are cars. A lot of them." Laura turned from the stove, confusion flickering into fear as she saw the line of vehicles pull up in front of their driveway. Within seconds, men in dark suits stepped out, each moving with military precision. Their boots hit the pavement in unison. The air felt different, heavy, sharp, electric. John came down the stairs, still half-dressed for his shift, and stopped mid-step. "Jesus," he muttered. "They found us." Laura grabbed his arm. "What do we do?" Before he could answer, level, strong. There was a pounding at the door. 3 deliberate knocks that rattled the frame. Shadow's ears went up instantly. He growled low and steady, planting himself between Daisy and the sound. The hair along his back bristled. John motioned for everyone to stay behind him. He opened the door a crack. A man stood there. Tall, late 40s, trimmed beard, expression carved in stone. He wore a black suit with a badge clipped to his chest. His voice was calm but carried authority like a weapon. Agent Nathan Cole, Federal Defense Security Division. He held up his ID, the seal glinting in the morning light. You're harboring government property. John's jaw tightened. Property? You mean our dog? Agent Cole didn't blink. The canine unit in your possession is part of a restricted defense project known as Project Sentinel, classified under Section 7A. We have orders to retrieve it immediately. Laura stepped forward, her voice shaking. You can't just barge into our home. Ma'am, Cole said evenly, you're in possession of experimental military equipment containing classified neural enhancements. Legally, that animal doesn't belong to you. At that, Daisy cried out, He's not equipment! He's Shadow! Agent Cole's gaze softened for a flicker of a second when he looked at the little girl. Her bare feet, her trembling chin, the way her arms wrapped protectively around the dog's neck. But then his expression hardened again. Stand aside, sweetheart. No, Daisy shouted. He's my friend! 2 agents stepped forward, hands hovering near their holsters. Shadow's growl deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. His body shifted, muscles coiled, not in attack, but in defense. His eyes stayed locked on Daisy's. He understood danger. He just didn't know why it came wearing suits. John raised his voice. You're not taking him like this. We saved that dog. We watched him almost die. Cole exhaled, rubbing a gloved hand over his brow. I appreciate what you did, sir, but this isn't a negotiation. The front yard was already crawling with agents, some setting up scanners, others talking into radios. A blue light swept across the windows as they activated a tracking device. Inside the house, the machine beeped once. Confirmation. The signal matched. Cole looked at his tablet. Confirmed. Project Sentinel Unit 7A. Laura pressed a hand to her mouth. Oh my God. Daisy's grip on Shadow's collar tightened until her knuckles went white. You can't take him. He's good now. He's safe here. Cole's voice softened just a fraction. Kid, this dog isn't what you think. He's a weapon. No! Daisy screamed. He's mine! For the first time, the agent hesitated. He looked at the little girl, the tears cutting clean paths down her cheeks, and something human flickered in his eyes. I wish it were that simple. Behind him, 2 operatives entered with a steel transport crate. The sight of it made Shadow snarl, teeth bared, stance low. Daisy clung to his fur, crying now. Don't let them take him, Daddy, please. John stepped between the agents and his daughter, timed 400 His firefighter instincts screamed to fight, to protect, but he also knew men like these didn't bluff. At least let us say goodbye, he said quietly. Cole's jaw clenched. He gave a short nod. 1 minute. Daisy knelt on the floor, face pressed to Shadow's fur. You're not a weapon, she whispered through sobs. You're my hero, remember? You saved people. You saved me. Shadow whimpered softly, nose nudging her cheek. His tail thumped once, weakly, against the floor. His gaze, filled with that strange depth that no machine could replicate, stayed fixed on her as if memorizing every detail. Time's up, Cole said. The agent stepped forward. Daisy screamed when they reached for him. No, don't touch him, please! Shadow lunged, not to bite, but to shield her. The agents grabbed his collar, forcing him down. The sound of metal against tile filled the air, followed by the thud of his body struggling against restraint. "Hold him steady!" one agent barked. Laura cried out, "Stop! You're hurting him!" But it was no use. The government men worked with practiced efficiency, cold, precise, emotionless. The crate door clanged shut, echoing like a verdict. Daisy's voice broke as she threw herself against the bars. "Shadow, please don't leave me!" The dog pressed his nose through the slats, eyes locked on hers. His claws scraped the metal floor, desperate to reach her. The sound of it, claws dragging, heart pounding, tears falling, filled the house like the howl of a ghost. John's fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to fight, but the sight of the armed convoy outside stopped him cold. Laura held Daisy tight as the girl sobbed into her shoulder. Agent Cole turned to John, his voice quieter now, almost regretful. "For what it's worth, this isn't personal. You did a good thing bringing him back, but this animal isn't meant for this world." He gave a signal, and the men began to move. The SUV's engines roared to life. The crate was carried out like a coffin. Daisy broke free from her mother's arms, running after them into the driveway. "You can't take him! He needs me!" One of the agents paused at the car door. For a brief second, Shadow's eyes met hers, through the narrow slit of the cage. The early sunlight caught the tear stains on her cheeks, and something inside that hardened soldier's heart almost cracked. Then the door slammed shut. Engines growled. The convoy rolled down the street, leaving only exhaust and silence. Daisy collapsed to her knees in the middle of the road, her small hands clutching at nothing. The morning birds began to sing, cruelly beautiful, as if mocking the quiet devastation left behind. John walked over, knelt beside her, and pulled her close. She didn't look up, her voice came out broken. "He was my friend, Daddy. Why did they take my friend?" John had no answer. He just held her tighter. Inside the house, the blood-stained towel from that first night still hung on the rack, silent proof of a promise made, and a love that the world refused to understand. Night fell over Maplebrook like a heavy blanket, soft, suffocating, and silent. The Miller home, once filled with laughter, now breathed only quiet. The porch light still glowed, but no one remembered to turn it off. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of wet fur and iodine, the ghost of the life that had just been taken away. Dinner sat untouched on the table. Steam had long vanished from the pot of stew Laura made out of habit, not hunger. John sat in his chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the front door. It was the same door Shadow had been dragged through that morning. The same door Daisy had run toward, screaming until her voice cracked. He hadn't said a word in hours. Laura sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. The cup had gone cold, but she didn't notice. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, felt too loud in the absence of the low, comforting rhythm of Shadow's breathing. From upstairs came the faintest creak of floorboards. "Daisy." Laura started to rise, but John shook his head softly. "Let her be," he murmured. His voice was rough, the kind that only comes after holding back too much emotion. She needs to talk to him in her own way. Laura sat back down, her eyes glistening. "She's 6, John. She shouldn't have to understand things like this." He rubbed a hand over his face, the words catching in his throat. "Feels like we lost a family member." That was the first thing he'd said since morning. The words hung in the air like a confession. Laura reached across the table, taking his hand. "We did." Upstairs, Daisy's room looked like a place time had stopped touching. Her toys sat exactly where she'd left them. Her stuffed bear on the bed, crayons scattered on the rug, the half-finished drawing of a dog still taped to the wall. The picture showed Shadow standing under a rainbow, tail wagging. She had written his name in big, uneven letters. Now the drawing seemed to look back at her like a memory she couldn't reach. She sat by the window, knees pulled to her chest, forehead pressed against the cool glass. The street outside was dark and quiet, the moon hanging low like a watchful eye. Her small voice broke the silence. God, if you're listening, please keep him safe. Her breath fogged the window. She traced a heart in the condensation with her finger, then added 2 small dots inside, one for her, one for Shadow. He didn't do anything wrong, she whispered. He was just scared. They shouldn't have taken him away. Her voice cracked on the last word. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her sleeve, but the tears kept coming. I know he's big and strong, but he's alone now. He doesn't like cages. Please, just let him know I'm still here. She looked up at the stars, faint, hidden behind a thin veil of clouds. I'll be good, I promise. I'll share my toys, eat my vegetables, anything. Just don't let him think I forgot him. The wind rustled the curtains like a quiet response. Somewhere in that endless stretch of sky, it felt like her words might be traveling, carried by the night, looking for someone who could still hear them. A dimly lit cargo bay, miles away. Rows of steel crates lined the floor, each one marked with stenciled codes and red hazard symbols. The air hummed with the low drone of an engine. Inside one of the crates, a pair of amber eyes opened. Shadow. The dog stirred, lifting his head slowly. Chains clinked against metal. His body still ached from sedation, but the soldier's discipline inside him refused to surrender. He could smell the cold air leaking through the vents, oil, disinfectant, the faint trace of gunpowder, and under it all, something else, the faintest memory of home. His ears twitched. A low whine escaped his throat. For a moment, he thought he imagined it. A whisper, soft and far away. Please keep him safe. He froze. His head lifted higher. The sound wasn't real. It couldn't be. But some part of him, buried deep beneath the training and the implants, recognized the voice. The girl, the warmth, the promise. He pressed his nose against the metal wall of the crate and whined again, a sound that trembled in the still air. Across the cargo bay, one of the guards looked up. Hey, the man muttered. Did you hear that? His partner shrugged. They all do that. The AI programming's half alive even when they're sedated. Don't think about it. But Shadow wasn't responding to a program. His eyes had gone soft, human almost. He rested his paw against the steel door, claws scraping faintly as if trying to reach through. The faint rhythm of his heartbeat matched another far away, small, fragile, steady. Daisies. In the Miller house, she pressed her palm to the window pane. In the crate, he pressed his paw against cold metal. 2 silhouettes separated by miles, but connected by something neither could name. Back in the kitchen, John stood by the door again, staring into the dark yard. The rain had started. Light, hesitant drops tapping against the windows. He could see the reflection of the porch light trembling in puddles. It reminded him of the night Daisy first brought Shadow home. Feels like it's raining the same way, he said quietly. Laura joined him, slipping her arm through his. Maybe it's a sign. He looked down at her, half smiling. Of what? That he's still out there, still fighting. Upstairs, Daisy had fallen asleep at the window, her hand still resting on the glass. Her teddy bear sat on her lap, guarding the space where Shadow used to sleep. The moonlight spilled across the room, painting everything silver. The toys, the drawing, the little girl curled up in prayer. For a moment, everything was still. And then, from somewhere in the distance, far beyond the horizon, beyond roads and fences, a dog's faint howl broke through the night. It was soft, almost swallowed by the wind, but if you listened closely, you could hear it. A note of longing, a promise carried through air and darkness. Daisy stirred in her sleep. Her lips parted, whispering a single word. Shadow. In that quiet exchange between dream and reality, between a child and her lost companion, something unspoken passed. Not in language, but in feeling. The kind of connection that defied walls, miles, and even law. Two hearts beating across the distance, keeping rhythm through the silence. And as the camera of life pulled back, one shot of a girl by her window, one of a caged soldier dog beneath flickering lights, the world seemed to pause, listening to the soft prayer still echoing through the rain. Please keep him safe. 3 weeks later, the Miller family found themselves sitting in a place that felt colder than any winter they'd ever known. The federal courthouse of Madison County loomed like a monument to everything unbending. Its marble halls smelled of varnish and old paper, a sterile kind of justice. Outside, protesters crowded the steps. Some held signs that read, "He's just a dog," while others waved banners saying, "Let Shadow stay home." Reporters swarmed the entryway, flashes bursting like lightning every few seconds. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Journalists, agents, and curious locals packed every seat. The air was heavy with judgment before the gavel even struck. At the defense table, John and Laura Miller sat stiffly, hands clasped, exhaustion carved into their faces. Between them sat Daisy, her small body lost in the oversized wooden chair. She clutched her worn-out teddy bear in one hand and twisted its ear nervously. Her hair was braided neatly, but her eyes, those once bright eyes, had dulled with worry. Across the aisle sat Agent Nathan Cole, suit immaculate, expression unreadable. His posture was rigid, but something in the slump of his shoulders suggested unease. And near the witness stand sat Mrs. Beatrice Jenkins, back straight, pearl necklace glinting under the lights, face composed like a woman convinced she was doing her civic duty. The clerk called the case. The United States of America versus John and Laura Miller, unlawful possession of classified federal property, case number 47, 2019, A. The judge, a gray-haired man with eyes like weathered steel, raised his gavel. Let's begin. The government's attorney rose first, a young man in a navy suit, voice smooth as glass. Your Honor, this case is simple. The defendants knowingly harbored government property, specifically a canine unit designated as Project Sentinel 7A under federal jurisdiction. This animal contains classified modifications tied to defense research. Its removal from government custody represents a breach of national security. He turned toward the jury, each word deliberate. No matter how sympathetic this story may seem, the law cannot bend for emotion. John clenched his fists beneath the table. Laura exhaled shakily. Daisy's legs swung nervously above the floor. The prosecutor called his first witness. Mrs. Beatrice Jenkins. Mrs. Jenkins approached the stand, chin lifted. She adjusted her glasses and folded her hands neatly after swearing in. Her voice, though polite, carried the weight of certainty. I've lived next to the Millers for 8 years, she began. Always thought they were decent folks, but one night I saw something strange. They were sneaking home late, carrying a large, bleeding animal. It was massive, looked trained, dangerous. I could tell by its posture. The next morning, I heard growling from their yard. I was frightened. so I did what any responsible citizen would. I called the sheriff. The prosecutor nodded approvingly. And in your opinion, Mrs. Jenkins, were they acting suspiciously? Yes, she said quickly. They were hiding something. That poor creature looked abused. I thought they'd heard it. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. At the defense table, Laura whispered fiercely, "That's not true." John squeezed her hand to keep her seated. Daisy's lip quivered. She hugged her teddy closer, eyes wide as Mrs. Jenkins continued. It wasn't until later I found out that dog was a military asset. They shouldn't have kept it. They endangered everyone. The prosecutor smiled faintly. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. No further questions. When the defense attorney stood, the air shifted. He was older, calm, with a voice that carried quiet conviction. Mrs. Jenkins, he said, did you ever actually see the Millers harm the dog? Well, no, she hesitated. But I saw blood. Blood from wounds he already had, the attorney interjected gently. Wounds inflicted before the Millers found him. Is that correct? Mrs. Jenkins faltered. I suppose. He leaned closer. Did you ever see the little girl with the dog? She blinked. Yes, always by his side. And did he ever act violently toward her? No. Toward anyone? A pause. No, but thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That's all I needed. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, what my clients did wasn't a crime. It was compassion. But the tension didn't fade. The room hummed with conflict. Law against love, logic against heart. Daisy fidgeted, glancing toward Agent Cole. He avoided her eyes, staring down at his badge instead. Then the prosecutor called him to the stand. Cole stood, straightening his jacket. He swore in, voice low and firm. Agent Nathan Cole, Federal Defense Division. Agent Cole, the prosecutor began, please confirm the status of the animal known as Shadow. Cole hesitated. The canine is registered under Project Sentinel 7A, Military Enhancement Unit, Classified Design. And is it true the animal was considered too unpredictable for civilian interaction? Yes, Cole said quietly. That's true. Daisy's eyes filled. She wanted to scream, but her voice caught. Unpredictable? He had been gentle with her, loyal, her friend. The prosecutor continued. Then it stands to reason the Millers put themselves and their community in danger. Objection! The defense attorney rose. The agent just admitted the dog's design, not its behavior. There's a difference. Sustained, the judge said, tapping his gavel. Cole exhaled. His eyes, just for a moment, drifted to Daisy. She looked so small at that table, clutching her teddy bear like a lifeline. Something cracked in his composure. When he spoke again, his tone softened. For what it's worth, that dog didn't act like a machine. He acted like a soldier, loyal, protective. The prosecutor frowned. That's not relevant. No, Cole said quietly, but it's true. The room murmured again. Reporters scribbled faster. And then, something happened no one expected. Daisy stood. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, echoing like thunder in the silent courtroom. She climbed onto it, her small frame trembling but defiant. Her voice wavered, but the words came from somewhere deep, pure, unfiltered truth. That's a lie, she cried, pointing at Mrs. Jenkins. We didn't hurt him. I saved him from dying. He needed me. The room went still. Even the cameras stopped flashing. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop. He was bleeding, and everyone walked away. He looked at me and I couldn't leave him there. You all talk about rules, but who helps when someone's hurting? The judge's lips parted, but no sound came out. Agent Cole looked down, jaw tight, eyes burning with guilt. Daisy's voice cracked as she clutched her teddy bear to her chest. He's not property. He's family. The silence that followed felt sacred. A pause so deep it seemed the whole world was listening. From the back of the courtroom, a reporter's flash went off. Then another, then 10 more. Cameras turned toward the little girl standing on her chair, her innocence lighting the cold room like a flame. The story spread before the gavel could fall. By evening, the world would know her words. Law versus compassion. A soldier dog versus the system that made him. But in that moment, that heartbeat of stillness, all anyone could hear was the echo of Daisy's trembling voice, breaking through the walls of authority. He needed me, and for the first time since the trial began, the judge's eyes softened. The next morning, the courthouse felt different. Yesterday's shouting had faded into whispers. The air was heavy, not just with tension, but with something deeper, the quiet ache of truth trying to be heard. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Protest signs swayed in the breeze. Let shadow go home. Compassion over control. Cameras lined the steps, reporters murmuring predictions about the case that had already gripped the nation. Inside, the Millers sat at the defense table again. John's suit jacket was wrinkled from a sleepless night. Laura's hands twisted a tissue into a tight rope, and between them, Daisy sat quietly, her teddy bear resting on her lap. She looked smaller today, pale, eyes tired, but there was still a spark in her gaze that hadn't dimmed. When the judge entered, the room rose. The gavel struck once. Court is now in session. The prosecutor stood, his tone clipped. Your Honor, we've heard the emotional testimony of a child. Today, we return to facts. The defendants harbored a government prototype, a dog trained for combat. Emotion cannot outweigh national security. The words hung cold in the air. Before the defense could respond, the back doors of the courtroom burst open. Every head turned. Dr. Michael Grant stood there, coat wrinkled, stethoscope still around his neck, eyes rimmed red from exhaustion. His presence alone changed the energy of the room. Time or phone. He carried the gravity of someone who had seen too much to stay silent. The judge looked up, surprised. And you are? Grant stepped forward, voice rough but firm. Dr. Michael Grant. I'm the veterinarian who treated the dog in question, Shadow. The defense attorney's eyes widened with relief. Your Honor, this witness can speak to the condition of the animal when the Millers found him. The prosecutor sighed but gestured to the bailiff. Let him testify. Grant walked to the stand, his limp noticeable, the result of long nights and little rest. He raised his right hand, swore in, and sat down heavily. For a moment he didn't speak. He looked at Daisy first, her small, anxious face, and nodded faintly, as if reassuring her that truth was finally here. Then he turned to the courtroom. I treated Shadow the night the Millers brought him in, he began, his voice echoing with quiet conviction. He was bleeding from multiple wounds, shrapnel, burns, fractured ribs. Whoever trained him left him to die when he became a liability. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the prosecutor frowned. Grant continued. I've treated dogs used in police and rescue work for 20 years. They're soldiers. They give everything. But this... He paused, eyes darkening. This was something else. He had a barcode tattooed under his fur, a serial number, like he was a piece of equipment. But when that little girl touched him, he looked at her like a person looks at home. He turned to the jury, voice soft but trembling. No human should do that to a soldier, even a canine. Daisy's eyes filled with tears. Laura reached for John's hand under the table. The judge leaned back slowly, his gaze distant, the words cutting deeper than any legal argument. The prosecutor cleared his throat, breaking the spell. Dr. Grant, with respect, whether or not you sympathize with the animal, it remains federal property. Grant's jaw tightened. Property doesn't bleed for you. Property doesn't fight for you. He pointed at Daisy. And property doesn't love you. The courtroom fell silent. Grant exhaled, running a hand through his graying hair. The Millers didn't steal government property. They saved a living being that your system abandoned. He looked toward Agent Cole, who sat at the witness bench again, his expression unreadable. And you were ordered to retrieve a dog you knew would never survive another experiment. Tell me I'm wrong. Cole didn't answer. Grant's voice lowered. That's what I thought. He turned back to the judge. You can call him whatever you want, Your Honor. Prototype, unit, asset. But to that little girl, he's family. And to anyone who's ever served alongside a dog, he's a hero. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then, faint commotion at the back of the room. A pair of guards entered, leading a figure on a reinforced leash. The murmurs grew. Reporters craned their necks. Shadow. He was thinner now, the fur on his shoulders shaved where the wounds had healed, a faint scar running along his ribs. But his gait was strong, cautious but proud. He looked around the courtroom, nostrils flaring, scanning faces until he found the one that mattered. Daisy. She stood instantly, breath catching. Shadow! The bailiff barked. Keep your distance, ma'am. But it was too late. Shadow had already seen her. That familiar voice, that heartbeat he knew. His ears perked, tail quivering. In one impossible motion, he yanked against the leash, metal chain snapping against the handler's wrist. Hey, hold him! Someone shouted. Gasps erupted. The courtroom was chaos. Reporters dropping cameras, security guards moving forward. But the dog wasn't attacking. He was running. Straight for Daisy. The sound of claws on tile echoed through the hall. Daisy dropped her bear, tears streaming as she ran too. Two figures drawn together through fear and faith. They met in the middle of the aisle, her arms wrapping around his neck before anyone could stop it. The courtroom fell silent. Not a shout, not a camera click, just the sound of a little girl's sob against the fur of her best friend. Shadow buried his head into her chest, whining softly. His tail wagged once, twice, slow, gentle, like he was afraid it wasn't real. Daisy held him tighter. I knew you'd come back, she whispered through tears. I knew it. Dr. Grant turned away, wiping his eyes. Even Agent Cole looked down, pressing his lips together as emotion broke through the rigid shell of uniformity. The judge cleared his throat, once, twice, but his voice faltered. This is highly irregular. No one cared. The court had stopped being a courtroom. It had become a cathedral, a place where love stood trial and for once refused to lose. Laura was crying openly now, and John had his arm around her. Reporters forgot their notes, their lenses fogged by tears they didn't expect. Daisy pressed her forehead against Shadow's. They called you a weapon, she whispered, but I know what you are. The judge swallowed hard. His gavel hand trembled. Order, he said quietly, though no one obeyed. Order. But the words didn't matter. The truth had already spoken. In that single moment, a child holding her dog, a courtroom frozen in awe, something in the heart of everyone there shifted. Rules, policies, definitions, all of it blurred against the simple, undeniable reality before them. A love too pure for rules, The courthouse had never seen a morning like this. By dawn, crowds filled the steps. Reporters, veterans, families, children waving signs painted with one word: shadow. Television vans lined the street, cameras streaming live. News anchors called it the trial that could redefine the boundary between science and soul. Inside, every seat was taken. Soldiers stood beside civilians, activists beside government agents. The air trembled with anticipation. At the defense table sat the Millers, John, his hands clasped in prayer, Laura, pale but steady, and Daisy, in her blue dress, clutching her teddy bear. Beside her lay Shadow, his head on her lap, freshly brushed, eyes lifting now and then to make sure she was still there. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harris," the bailiff called. The judge entered, older, worn by sleepless nights. "This is the final day of deliberation," he said. "We will hear closing arguments before delivering a verdict." The prosecutor rose. His tone was precise, mechanical. "Your Honor, this creature, Project Sentinel 7A, was engineered to protect our nation. It is government property, not a pet. The defendants interfered with a classified operation, endangering the public. We cannot let emotion override duty. Compassion cannot come at the cost of control." His words echoed like steel. Daisy's hand tightened in Shadow's fur, then Laura stood. Her attorney tried to stop her, but she shook her head. "I need to say this." The judge hesitated, then nodded. "You say compassion can't outweigh control," she began softly. "But without compassion, there's nothing left worth controlling. That animal you call property saved lives long before he met us. You built him to obey, then threw him away when he broke. But my daughter saw what your systems couldn't. She saw a soul." A ripple swept through the crowd. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed. "Maybe you think the law is about order," Laura continued, her voice trembling but clear. "But laws were made to protect life. And life isn't just human. It's anything that feels pain, anything that loves. Without compassion, there's no humanity left to defend." Silence fell. Deep, reverent. Even the prosecutor looked down. Judge Harris leaned forward, tapping his pen once, twice. His gaze drifted to Daisy, then to Shadow, those brown eyes, calm and knowing. "When I took this bench," he said finally, "I swore to uphold the law. But every law was written by a human being, and humans are capable of compassion." He paused, voice lowering. "The law was made by people, so was mercy. And humanity must never abandon one for the other." He turned toward the Millers. "This court rules in favor of the defendants. The animal known as Shadow is released into the care of the Miller family." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, applause thundered. Reporters cried. Soldiers clapped. Even Agent Cole, seated near the front, smiled faintly and bowed his head. Laura covered her mouth, tears streaming. John held her close. "We did it," he whispered. Daisy dropped her teddy bear and threw her arms around Shadow. The dog barked once, a bright, joyous sound, and pressed against her shoulder. The courtroom filled with laughter, sobs, and applause. Cameras flashed like stars. Judge Harris removed his glasses, his voice breaking. Court adjourned. As people stood, a reporter called out, "Judge Harris, what does this mean for the future?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe it means we've remembered how to be human." The bailiff opened the doors, and sunlight flooded in, warm, golden, alive. Daisy looked down at Shadow through her tears. "See?" she whispered. "I told you they'd understand." Shadow pressed his forehead to hers, tail sweeping the floor like a heartbeat. And as the applause faded and the cameras dimmed, one truth shone through, clear and eternal. Love had won. The sun sank behind the Miller home, turning the fields to honey and gold. The air smelled of rain and grass, clean, new, forgiven. The trial was over. No more cameras, no reporters. Only peace. Out in the open field, Shadow ran, his body strong again, scars glinting faintly as his paws kissed the soft earth. Every stride was freedom reborn. Daisy stood barefoot in the grass, tossing a tennis ball high. "Go, Shadow!" she laughed. He leapt, catching it mid-air, a flash of grace and life, then bounded back, tail wagging. From the porch, John and Laura watched in silence. Their hands met naturally, fingers entwining. "I used to think wars were fought with guns," John murmured. Laura smiled. "And now? Now I know some are fought with love." Shadow dropped the ball at Daisy's feet, his eyes soft, unburdened. She knelt and stroked his fur. "You're faster than before," she teased. He pressed his forehead to her chest, and she whispered, "You saved people once, Shadow. But now, you saved the world's heart." Fireflies began to rise through the twilight. Daisy threw the ball again, her laughter blending with the hum of evening. The land breathed, wind in the grass, leaves whispering, the gentle rhythm of paws on soil. John glanced toward the woods, pitched her first. "You think he remembers the lab, the soldiers?" Laura shook her head. "Maybe. But what matters is what he remembers now." "And what's that?" "That he's loved. That he's home." Daisy stood still beneath the fading sky, Shadow beside her. The ball lay forgotten. "We did it, didn't we?" she whispered. He leaned into her hand. Above, a hawk cried. The first star appeared. "Dinner's getting cold, sweetheart," John called. "Coming," Daisy answered. But she lingered one more minute, watching the last light fade. Then she turned toward the house, walking barefoot through the golden field, Shadow at her side, two silhouettes moving as one beneath a burning sky. The wind brushed the grass in waves. The world was quiet again. A voice, soft, eternal, seemed to drift through the dusk. "Some wars are fought with guns, others with love." At the porch, John bent to pet Shadow. "Welcome home, soldier." Shadow's tail thumped, his eyes at peace. Laura leaned in the doorway, tears shining. Daisy cupped the dog's face. "No more cages," she whispered. "Only fields." He licked her cheek, sealing the promise. As the door closed behind them, laughter echoed faintly. The camera of the heart pulled back, the house glowing warm, the field golden under twilight. And on the horizon, a girl and her dog stood together, their shadows one, symbols of loyalty, hope, and redemption. The world had called him a weapon, but tonight, he was home. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear uniforms. They walk beside us on four legs, asking for nothing but love in return. Shadow's story reminds us of what German shepherds have always known. Loyalty isn't taught, it's lived. Their courage, devotion, and quiet understanding have a way of softening even the hardest parts of the human heart. If you have a dog of your own, take an extra moment tonight. Look into their eyes, feel that steady heartbeat, and remember that you're their whole world. And if you ever want to learn new ways to connect more deeply with your companion, there's a wonderful resource I found recently that offers gentle, thoughtful guidance. No pressure, just something worth exploring when you feel like it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about training or tricks. It's about love, patience, and the simple miracle of having a friend who never gives up on you.